Disclaimers. This video is based on my personal experience and by no means an indication of how the process works at my current university. My experience might differ from your experience. How things will go during your interview can vary for a variety of reasons. And when I say something typically happens like that, is not a guarantee that it might happen like that for you, and it might even be very different. So be prepared for that. And with that knowledge in mind, now sit back, relax, and listen to the video. Hi there. I'm a professor of psychology in the United Kingdom. I have a lot of experience with job interviews, both as an applicant and as someone listening to new applicants. There is a very unique and special process for job interviews in the UK. It's different from how it's done in mainland Europe. It's different from the US. So if you come from a foreign country, or if you're British and you've never done this before, listen to this presentation and I'll take you through all the stages of the interview and I will give you tips based on my own experience. First of all, it's good to know that there are basically three main parts in the whole interview process. The first one is the panel interview, which typically takes between 30 and 60 minutes, in which you are asked about your CV and so on and what you've done in the past. So that's very personal. Then there is the presentation or job talk, and we're going over the details. So typically you talk about your research, or maybe you give a pretend lecture. And there are social events where you meet other colleagues. Sometimes you even go for dinner and so on. And even though the presentation and the social events are, they're important, the presentation and the social events on their own, they cannot make that you get a job. The panel interview is most important, but you could in principle mess up the presentation and the social events by doing it the wrong way. And I want to help you to prevent that, and I will give you tips on how to do really well in all three parts. But remember that the panel interview is really where the decision is made ultimately. And the presentation and the social events, they are sort of used as a confirmation of the decision that has been made in the panel interview. So for example, if the selection committee says, well, like this applicant was really good, then they will say, how was the presentation? How did this person, did this person say anything interesting when talking to individual colleagues? And then they might hear that that person was also doing a really good job there, and they might say, oh, that's a great person to apply. But if your presentation, for example, is not so good, then they might think, okay, well, we had two candidates that we thought were equally good. Maybe we should use the presentation as the ultimate deciding factor. I first will give you some general tips. The first one is really do your homework, and that is really check out who works in the department. That's really important. During your interview, for example, you need to be able to mention some names of colleagues who work there that you can say, well, for example, if I would get a job, I would work together with this and this person. That sounds good because then you show that you have prepared yourself well. Another thing is that you should dress appropriately, and I would say in the UK that means that men need to wear a suit with a tie, and of course for women there's somewhat more flexibility, but use your common sense. Dress really smartly, I would say. It never hurts, even though most people in the university will on normal days just dress very casually. Another general tip is to check out the university strategy. Every university in the UK has a typically 5-year strategy. Here are some examples from the University of Liverpool or from the University of Warwick. and they typically have some phrases such here as the University of Excellence of the University of Warwick, saying excellence with purpose. And these strategies, they are also a way for the university to say this is really what we want to be, this is what we want to become in the coming years. It's useful, I think, to read through those. Another general tip is generally about your behavior. Behave like the ideal colleague. Be polite to people. It's sort of like obvious, but it's important to attend that. Be positive. Be a positive person. And don't use bad language. Also, for example, when you talk about your current job, even if you don't like your current job so much, and that's maybe the reason why you're looking for a new job, don't say that, because there's nothing to gain from that. Another tip that you really, something that you really should know, if you are in the UK, you might be surprised that when you're invited, they often put the candidates in the same room, so you will meet the other candidates. Not always, but that can happen, and it can be a surprise if you come from a different country where that is not common. So be prepared for that. So now we go to the panel interview. In the panel interview, you sit at a table and you have several people sitting on the other side. I would say at least 3 people, sometimes even 5 or 6. General tip is also that I would recommend to, before you attend the interview, you can email the person who has invited you and say who will be attending the panel interview. That is, you're allowed to ask that, and they will always tell you. And I would do that so that you can, prepare for that. In the interview, there are basically 5 components. There's the welcome, there is the intro question, there are the main questions, there is the exit question, and there is the goodbye. Now these 5 elements, I'm going to talk in detail about them, but realize that there is a structure. This is the structure, okay? And so prepare for that. The welcome is when you just, you come into the room, right? So what you do is, there will be one chair for you. Don't shake hands with the people on the panel. That's not expected. That's never done. There will be a glass of water on the table for you to drink. You can put your stuff down. So sometimes you can bring a little notebook where you can write down something. I mean, it's not necessary. You don't need to bring anything. Some people might find it useful to have their CV with them so that if they're asked about something, they can just look it up quickly. That's a little bit personal choice. I don't think it matters. The intro question is always an easy question. It's something like, why do you apply for this job? Or what skills do you bring? This is a job. This is a job question that helps you to, get going. It warms you up. You can prepare for it really well because that question is more or less the same. So say why you apply for the job, what is particularly good about you, what skills do you bring with you. So this is in general terms. That is that's the first question, and you will feel, because when you come in, you're very tense. But once you do that, it's sort of like then you get into this mode of the interview. Then there are the main questions. All questions are important. The intro question is important as well, but the main questions there will be at least one question about your research. There will be one question about your teaching. There will be one question about your administrative skills. So in the United Kingdom, you always have what we call an admin job. So for example, somebody is responsible for communicating with the library. Somebody will look after, reviewing the exam questions. These admin jobs, if you have experience with that, you can say, well, I've done this and this. So say that if you have experience with that, say that, explain that, because they think that is important. There will also be a question maybe about, from somebody on the human resources. They might be asking something like, well, if you have a difficult colleague, how would you deal with that? So there are different types of questions. But again, there are these three main areas, right? Research, teaching, and administrative skills. And then there is an exit question. The exit question is always the same. It's always like this. Now, we have asked you many questions. Do you have a question for us? I would advise to ask a question. You could, in principle, say, no, everything was clear. I think that doesn't look that good. I would advise you to ask a general question. Do not ask a question, do not start to negotiate. Don't say, well, if I get a job, do I get a big office or, those sort of things. That's not on. You should ask, I recommend to ask a general interesting question, like something like what are your plans for the future as a department? Do you plan to grow the department, or you know can you say something about your expected investment in research resources in the department, or how many staff members exactly do you have, or how many students do you have? Like these sort of like general questions. They're easy to answer for the panel, and they're good questions because they also demonstrate that you are genuinely interested in learning about your new potential workplace. And then there's the goodbye. Now, of course, the exit question is sort of like the goodbye, but then you say, well, goodbye. So again, there's no shaking of hands. Then that's it, right? So and then you can relax after that. Um, Also, as part of the exit question, if you are grateful for having been invited, I think it's not a bad thing to say that, right? You can say, well, look, thank you for having the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Or you can do that in the intro question as well. So express your gratitude if that is the case, of course. Um, I have a couple of more tips. First of all, the questions, they are the same for all candidates. That's quite important to know. So it's a really fair process. Each person at the table asks you one question. And finally, there are no trick questions. So I have sometimes read somewhere where people would say, where people not only expect trick questions, but also try to be sort of like clever in giving clever answers, such as when you're asked, do you have any questions for us, then to ask, do I get a job? As if that, as if you would gain anything from that. You wouldn't. So do not try to be clever on those sort of things. Because that's not, certainly not in the UK, that's not something that people look for. Realize that the decision is made afterwards, and that is a decision that all the people on the panel will make together and nobody individually. So there are no trick questions, and I think I would not try to come up with really sort of like clever questions at the end, as in the examples of, do I get a job? I mean, that is not something that you should do. At the end, you should also not to try to negotiate. So if I get a job, I would like this and this and this. I mean, because then you're jumping far ahead. That is a bad thing to do. What I also would say is listen very carefully to what exactly is asked. So sometimes you see that people are asked something, they give a lengthy answer, but they don't answer exactly what was being asked. So, for example, imagine this. Imagine you get a question, what skills do you bring to the university? And if you then say, well, I applied for this job because I really like the job, I think it's a great job, and you say why you apply, why you really want to move there. I think it's a great university and so on. No, and then you can give a good motivation. But if you didn't say, well, what skills actually you bring, then that's missing. Um, you can One thing that you can do is actually to help yourself with that is you can repeat the question. So okay, so you're asking me what skills I bring to the job. Well, here are the skills that I bring to the job, right? So that you repeat that, so that you for yourself sort of like rephrase what the question is. I personally find that quite a helpful technique to help me focus on a specific question. You can also, in order to ensure yourself, if you're not sure that you have really answered the question, you can say, well, does that answer the question that you asked? Because then, then they sort of like need to say, if you didn't, then you can say, no, actually we asked this and this and this, right? So they can give a clarification. I would say also be specific. This means if people ask, what are you good at? Then you say, well, I'm just really good, right? I'm just a very skillful person. Now, that is not specific. That's very generic. But you need to give examples. Well, I'm very good in this. For example, last year, a colleague of mine asked me to help me with, writing a research paper, and I sat down for 2 weeks with my colleague, and we went over all the details, and I helped him or her a lot. So that's a very specific example, or say something very specific about a specific student that you helped. So be specific. Give examples, right? So give examples of what you've done. And I would say, if possible, relate your answer to how you would work at a new university. Because what I noticed myself, for example, if I listen to a candidate, then I always have in the back of my mind that this is a potential colleague. And I think about, well, okay, so how would this person work in the job that we would appoint this person for? So we are forward looking. So if you say something about your research, you might relate it to how you would continue your research at this new job. If you say something about your great teaching in the past, say how you would apply that knowledge and experience in the future at this new job. I think that helps the panel then with their thinking process of how suitable you are for this job. Now I want to say a few words about the presentation, or the job talk as it is sometimes called. First of all, do not make it too difficult. This is actually quite important. Imagine you're doing some really fascinating, complex research. Do not overwhelm the audience with it. Typically, the people who are sitting in the audience are not the same people as on the panel, because the interview panel is doing interviews while other candidates on the same day give a job talk. The audience will be staff members who may be working in a different area than you work in. So if you are, say, applying in psychology and you have done great work in the field of cognitive psychology, if you're talking to a social psychologist, they might have very little understanding of the complexities of your research. So try to make it a talk that everybody can understand. That is very important, I think. The presentation is very much about your communication skills. Explain terms that you use, again, because not everybody might be familiar with the research that you're doing. And I think there's nothing as bad that people after 5 minutes of your talk, they say, okay, I'll just don't follow this, right? So then it's difficult for people to judge you. And I would say also keep eye contact with the audience. I would definitely recommend not to read off a piece of paper. Instead, make sure you are an engaging speaker, because I think they judge you very much on not just on how good you are in your research. I think it is, that's probably part of it, but it's also about how would you teach to students at a university. Sometimes the question is actually give a talk that would be suitable for university students. Also make sure you read the instructions that they give you for the talk. And certainly be enthusiastic. Again, that's about communication, right? Be this interesting person that can engage an audience. Now, there will also be socials, a coffee maybe, or sometimes a dinner, or one-to-one meetings with colleagues. Again, first of all, I would say do not drink, right? So if you drink alcohol, you might lose some inhibitions to say things that you might later regret. Be positive, right? So don't be negative about your current job. or about the job where you're applying for, ask questions. Try to understand how this place works, because I think an interview or this whole process is not just about the university learning about you as a potential colleague, but also for you actually to make a decision about, do I really want to work at this university? Talk to as many people as you can, I would say. That's good, and you get a really good broad idea of what that department is like. Now, how is the decision made? Actually, at the end of the interview, they often say when they will contact you. They will say, well, in the next 2 weeks we will contact you. The reality is that usually the decision is made on the same day. So when they have listened to all the candidates, they're often on one day or maybe on 2 days. It depends a little bit. Well, so if they have, like, sometimes they appoint multiple people, and then it might take more days. So, well, the decision is typically made after the last candidate has been interviewed, and then they have a list of all the great things about the different candidates, and they say, well, we will appoint this person. And then as soon as the decision has been made, you might get a call from the head of the department. I just took here a random picture. Of course, it might be a man or it might be a woman. And that person, if you've gotten the job, they will say, well, congratulations, we would like to offer you the job. And if you are that lucky person, then you say, oh, that's great, thank you very much. And then I would say, well, what's the process now? So that they can explain what the next steps are. Now, about a decision timeline, you typically hear within a couple of days. It can vary. Sometimes you hear it within a couple of hours. It depends very much on how many candidates there are, how many jobs they have to give, and so on, over how many days they interview. So that's hard to say exactly, but it goes relatively quickly. But sometimes they offer the job to someone who then rejects the offer because that person maybe also got another job offer and had to choose, and then they still would come back to you maybe. So it's hard to say exactly. You will get the official paperwork after you have spoken to the head of department, and it's only then that you should start to negotiate. Don't negotiate when you get the call from the head of the department. When you get a call from the head of the department, you say, well, thank you very much, that's great, I look forward to getting the official paperwork. Can you say me, and you can say, can you maybe tell me about what the process is? And those are the sort of like the general tips that I've given. I wish you good luck with your interview, or if you haven't got an invitation, I hope this helped at least explain to you what the process is. I think generally, and this is a good thing I think about the United Kingdom, the process is really fair because all the candidates, they are treated equally. So that's a great thing. I would say the more knowledge and understanding you have about how the process works, the less nervous you probably feel. If you have any feedback or any comments, please leave them in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe the channel if you liked the video and if you would like to get more similar videos. And that's it. Goodbye for now and good luck.